Clio, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Well, good evening and welcome to Small Church. My talk tonight is about food, and it is entitled Food because I couldn't think of any other good title. So I will get right into it. The practice of paying attention to your breathing, breathe in love, breathe out peace, take calming breaths, take cleansing breaths, is taught by every Eastern religion, every yoga teacher, during church services, workshops, practically everywhere. Breathing is essential. Just try going without breathing for a few minutes or an hour or so, and the essential nature of air going in and out of your lungs is manifest. I mention this because in all this breathing in and out, this aspect of our lives is lifted up as a spiritual act, but it isn't the only one. For me, putting food into our bodies is also sacred. Despite the fact that we humans will sit down and eat together at every opportunity, only the communion service makes eating something a truly religious act. We say prayers of thanks over the food if we come from a tradition that encourages this, but mostly we just dig in, often while reading something. The Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh was clear that growing, preparing, serving, and eating food is a religious act. One of reverence and respect for the entire process. For him, it was an expression of mindfulness. Hardly any of us prepare and serve food in this manner. The biggest things on television used to be daytime soaps and televangelists. Oral Roberts, Jimmy Swaggart, and their ilk shook their Bibles and banged their pulpits selling us religion. Today, the big names on the airwaves are the celebrities of food. Rachel Ray, Gordon Ramsay, and many others offer us their recipes, their techniques for constructing the perfect meal, and of course, their expensive cookware. Their temples are gleaming kitchens with appliances that very few of us can afford. They have acolytes who supply them with ingredients and do all the prep work, making the rituals look easily reproducible to all. But the thing that characterizes all of these shows is abundance. There is just so darn much food, an inexhaustible cornucopia of delicious fruits, vegetables, meats, and irresistible delights conjured up from butter, eggs, cream, flour, and chocolate. These shows sell food like the evangelists sell religion. At least Rachel Ray does not tell us we're going to go to hell if we get the recipe wrong. But the real lesson of these shows is that food is everywhere, not just food, but fabulous food. And we can make it in our own homes every day. Just follow these simple directions and this incredible abundance will be yours. Well, I wish it were true. We are very rich people. And if we want to have that sort of hyped up food in our kitchens, we most certainly can. But numerically, we are a very small group of people compared with the world population. It is predicted that 130 million people will be going hungry this year, which is an increase over pre-COVID-19 numbers. That includes 368 million children going hungry, missing meals and snacks, and that is more than the population of the United States. It is true that most of these hungry people live in Africa, the Pacific Islands, Asia, India, and some South American countries, but we have not escaped the relentless numbers here in the United States. More than 11 million children here live in food insecure homes. Because of the pandemic, this number will rise to 18 million this year. I won't dish up too many numbers. The takeaway here is that things were bad, now they are worse. And children who depended upon school breakfasts and lunches are even hungrier. We all have to make choices about where we donate our dollars. Most of us already support our local food bank, and we must all continue to do that. If you want to expand that, Google Mercy Corps, that's C-O-R-P-S, which helps children here in the US get meals. Other agencies help children in other parts of the world, and they can all be found online. Right now, probably the best use of some of your dollars is to help elect people who care about children. There is actually plenty of food in the world, but getting it to the people who need it is not easy. Also, fully 1/3 of all food stocks in the world are destroyed by these distribution problems and pests. In order for grains to be stored, for instance, they must be perfectly dry all of the time and guarded against rodents and other pests. And that is not as easy in small African villages or in damp climates as it is here. Right now, there are biblically huge swarms of locusts devouring crops in parts of Africa. Each locust eats its weight in food every day, and these swarms have countless billions of insects which devour in one day enough food to feed 2,500 people. When we add in the normal diminution of food stocks due to droughts, floods, lack of fertile soil, desertification, and the horrors of war, the third horseman of the apocalypse comes charging in with its balance scale, sowing hunger and famine. Now, famine is nothing new. I checked, thank you, Wikipedia, and there has hardly been a century without a famine. Europe was plagued with hunger, and the Little Ice Age, which started in the 1300s after a warm period in which the population grew, caused the death of millions throughout that century. The Great Leap Forward in China took 20 million lives from starvation. It was a national policy to reduce the population. Africa has had many famines in our lifetimes, but the one that struck me most forcibly was the one caused by the Nestle Company. Back in the 70s, it was the policy of the Nestle Company to send women dressed as nurses into hospitals to convince new mothers to use the milk replacement sold by the company instead of breastfeeding their babies. The mother's milk dried up, and the Nestle product was so expensive that these poor families sometimes used half their income buying the product. The other children in the family suffered. The mothers diluted the product to make it last longer, and the babies died by the thousands. It took an international boycott of Nestle products to make the company stop this practice. The list of countries in Africa afflicted with hunger and famine right now is available online if you are interested. We are told to think globally, act locally. Thinking globally about food means being aware. Hold on, I have to take these, right? We have to be aware of where food is scarce and why, electing and encouraging officials to send food, supporting agencies that have feet on the ground. Acting locally is another matter entirely. The first action we must take is making sure that food banks are well supplied, especially during this pandemic. One of the drivers for having children back in school is that many of them eat breakfast and lunch at school. The pandemic, as noted above, is causing even more children to go hungry. We have the SNAP program, which is a direct contribution of money to qualifying people of all ages, and the WIC program, which is specific to mothers and their young children. We also have direct contributions of food administered through the counties, and probably more of these agencies that I do not know about off the top of my head. But the point is that there is food and there is access. We churchy people know that food is available through the various dinners that are free to the public at the churches. Some churches had a free dinner once a week. Since the church buildings are closed right now, there's an entire group of people, mostly old, not affluent, who are having to replace that food out of their meager funds. I think it would be difficult to find out who these folks are and how they are faring. I have said it before, and I will say it again. If no babies were born on this planet for 10 years, we would be just fine. But this, and if this is the most important thing I can say about food, we cannot go 1 year without a harvest. We cannot go 1 year without a harvest. We can we should store grain. President Roosevelt instituted a national policy of storing grain to smooth out the boom and bust aspect of agriculture. But in 1996, due to deregulation and globalization, this reserve was depleted until in 2008, it was completely gone. This means that our country has no grain reserves and cannot help the population in an agricultural crisis. On a national level, no help is coming. But grain is a dehydrated, highly portable, easily stored, high-calorie, nutritious food that has been the basis of civilization since the beginning of agriculture. Wheat, rice, corn, and beans are the foods that feed the world. Fruits and vegetables are really luxuries in times of scarcity and very expensive. They are water-laden, delicate, highly perishable, difficult to transport, and difficult to store for long periods. Few of us rich people think about the food on our plates in times of abundant harvest. The grocery stores are laden with hundreds of different foods, meats of all kinds, every form of milk and cheese. We can have anything we want. But what if? What if we have several meager harvests? What if we must compete for food grown here in the United States with foreign companies or nations which bid for it in the international marketplace? And we do, of course, due to deregulation and globalization. What if the weather is really bad? Floods, snow, or inches of ice that take down the power lines and put some of the people without power for 2.5 weeks in our area and up to 8 weeks in northern Canada? What if wildfires burn the vineyards and orchards in California? Or what if the countries we import food from are so beset by disease that the workers cannot grow and harvest the food we have come to depend upon? 31% of our vegetables and about 48% of our fruits are imported. We used to grow pineapples in Hawaii, but now they come from Costa Rica. Bananas could come from Hawaii, but they too are grown in Central America. All of our apples used to be locally grown, and there's an apple storage building right down in Ayer by the fitness center. Local growers of fruits and vegetables are finally getting enough business to sustain themselves, but they cannot supply the local demand. The fact is, the nutrients we need for complete health come from fruits and vegetables, and as I said before, they are the hardest to grow, ship, and store. After you have donated to the food bank, after you have donated to local and international charities, what can you do to ensure a decent food supply for yourself and your family? People are sometimes impressed that Eric and I grow and store some of our food, and they sometimes comment that we are all set in case of a disaster. But while we do enjoy gardening and preserving some of our food, it is woefully inadequate when set against the number of calories we need. We are advised to shoot for 2,000 calories per day per person, including children in the family. For my family, that is 10,000 calories a day. The LDS Church, the Mormons, advise their members to have a year's supply of food for their families in their homes. They also have many more children than the average US families. They have this down to a science, and they have sources, recipes, all sorts of tips for their families, even YouTube videos showing how to store and then prepare the stored foods. There are companies online that will sell you all or part of a year's food supply. The prices range from about $1,800 to $2,500 depending upon the number of calories per day you want and usually how much meat you want. And Melissa, perhaps you have that picture that can be shown at this time or at any time. Now that is from Costco. That is 1 year's supply of food for one person. And I'm sure that hardly anybody can imagine storing that much in their homes, much less food for, say, a family of 5 or 7. But that, in fact, is what it looks like. That comes to you dried and freeze-dried and packaged. It will last at least 10 years in your basement. Thanks, Melissa. That is a fairly extreme supply of food. Even the pioneers on the frontier did not grow all their food. Flour and other staples were shipped in from the east. I have a friend up in Maine, a self-styled hippie back to the land fellow, and he grows most of what he and his family eats. And even in his younger years, he told me he probably never grew more than 80%, and he's a vegan. Most gardeners who grow a lot of food and preserve some of it are lucky to hit 8%. So what then should we do? Especially, what should we do this year? And here are two answers. The first answer is do nothing at all. This answer presupposes that no matter what happens outside our homes, no matter how bad things could conceivably get, you will still be able to go to the grocery store and buy anything you want. Doing nothing also presupposes that if too much snow falls, if ice builds up on the road, if anything keeps you from leaving your house and securing food, someone will show up at your door with food for you. And that someone with food will leave off taking care of themselves and their families and come to your door with succor and rescue. Now, if a winter storm is predicted, the grocery stores are empty in a day. Remember the beginning of the lockdown? Just picture those empty shelves. The other answer is that you do something now to secure your future dinners. No, you do not need to go online and buy a year's supply of food, carefully packed to last for 10 years. If we all actually had to do that, then things would be so bad it wouldn't matter how much food we had stored. I keep advising people to look in their cupboards and check to see how many meals they have. Could you feed yourself and your family for 3 days, for a week? A week's worth of food is 21 meals and numerous snacks. Okay, you've looked and you're now asking, what should I do to make sure that I can feed everyone? And how long should I plan for? My starting point for most people is 2 weeks worth of food, and that is not part of your weekly grocery planning. Storing a month's food would be better. One woman I read about online mentioned how glad she was that she had 6 months food stored because her husband lost his job and they had nothing, except she could feed her family as well as ever. Storing food takes up space, and that has to be considered. Anyone with a basement will have plenty of storage, but what if you live in one of those stripped down condos or an apartment? This is a question that always comes up during my food preservation workshops. Where do I put all that extra food? Well, let us consider the most extreme case, the tiny apartment. If you are serious, you can put a case of canned chili under your shoes in the back of your closet, a flat box filled with canned goods under your bed. Fill those upper cupboards that you cannot reach without a step stool. Many apartments have storage units, and those can handle a lot of stored food. One could even buy a number 10 can, that's the big can, of dehydrated tomato powder to reconstitute for sauce instead of storing tomato products with all that bulky water still in them. Stored food comes in 3 categories: liquid, canned, and dehydrated. Vegetables, fruits, and meats, many prepared foods are all available canned. Chili with beans and a side of canned corn is a perfectly decent meal, as is a can of tuna and some tuna helper. I know these meals are not ideal for us rich folks, but they store well and they do not need anything special to be eaten. Liquids take up a lot of space, but you have to consider storing them. If a storm is coming and you forget to fill containers with water and the power goes out, you still have the water in the toilet tanks, which is perfectly clean and usable. Just don't let anyone flush the toilet. If you have a water heater that stores hot water that can be drained out the bottom, even if it has sediment in it, it can be left to settle and then used. Some people have barrels of water in special plastics that can remain fresh for years, but that is not necessary. In a real emergency, you can walk over to a pond and get water that you can filter and boil on your own. This is, after all, New England. Dehydrated food is easily stored, easily reconstituted, does not take up much space, and lasts for years. Most of what we eat is actually dehydrated, but we don't think about it that way. The most obvious, of course, are rice, wheat, and flour, wheat products, pastas of all kinds, oatmeal, popcorn. The next time you go to the grocery store, take some extra time to peruse the shelves, and you will see many products that you could easily add to your storage, but only if your family will actually eat them on a regular basis. If you add Lipton's dried onion soup, some gravy packets, and the normal spices and herbs you already have, you can dress up quite a lot of bland beans. Sugar is dehydrated, salt is dehydrated. Your kitchen is already full of dried food. At my house, we always have wheat berries to be ground for flour because they stay fresh for a very long time. We buy rice in 20-pound sacks. We have dried beans in bulk and in 1-pound packages. We buy honey in 12-pound jars from central Maine. We buy organic sugar in 10-pound packages. I always make sure that I have pasta sauce, even though I can my own tomatoes, and I have many meals worth of dried pasta. And that brings me to canned and jarred foods. Commercially processed canned foods will last a very long time. The date you see on the jar is only a suggestion. Foods do not go bad in the can, but they do lose some of their delicate nutrients over time. They do not lose their carbohydrates, their protein, or their calories. This is where rotating your stock comes in. The first thing is to decide not to purchase anything you or your family will not eat. Do not buy dehydrated liver or canned okra or dried octopus or whatever. Take inventory. What meals does everyone like? How easy are they to prepare? Are you willing to settle for packaged or canned foods instead of fresh? How flexible are you? So you're going to buy some extra food. It is canned, jarred, or dehydrated. You are buying rice, but not potatoes. You are buying canned, but not frozen peas. Bread does not last, crackers do. Canned tuna is great for extra food. Canned soup, canned beans, chili, beef stew, all these last for a long time in the pantry. And since you're only buying what you will truly eat, you just rotate your stock. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you get to the back of your closet or pull a box of canned goods out of your storage unit and find they are 3 years out of date, you're not going to want to eat them unless you are actually starving. Here's the thing. I cannot tell you exactly what to store. Some things are obvious, like pasta and spaghetti sauce, soup, beans, vegetables, canned vegetables, and peanut butter, and breakfast foods, dried cereals. But those boxes take up a lot of space. You're better off with granola and oatmeal and dried or evaporated milk. Some things are not so obvious, like condiments and jam. But anything that requires refrigeration is not a candidate for storage. Anything liquid takes up a lot of space, so it's better to use what space you do have to store water and rely on powdered juice drinks and instant tea and coffee. And I would also think about cooking. If you have natural gas, you can light the stove yourself and keep on cooking. If you have an electric stove and the electricity goes out, you must have another source of cooking heat. Then the best source of heat is a burner that attaches to a propane tank. If you have an adequate camping burner that works, you could use that, but a single lobster pot burner attached to a standard barbecue grill propane tank is better, or perhaps you can cook on the barbecue. Now, some people invest in a standalone generator to power their houses. We do not have one, but we keep talking about it. In the 38 years we've lived in this house, our power has rarely been out for more than a few hours at a time, and only once for 2.5 days. Groton has its own electric company and its own repair equipment. So we do not have to wait for National Grid to repair the damage in Worcester, Lowell, Lawrence, etc. before ours is back online. I don't want to advise you to purchase a lot of expensive equipment, but you should look at having a source of cooking heat, because it will make any disaster in which you are at home much more comfortable. Eric and I have a double burner propane-fired lobster pot stand, which we use for water bath canning, and we have all kinds of other equipment as well. The last pieces we acquired are a dehydrator and a vacuum packer, and I only wish that we'd had them decades ago. We have a low-cost food saver vacuum packer and a low-cost American Harvest dehydrator. A new one with 8 trays will cost less than $300. A food saver vacuum sealer like ours will last many years and it is about $80. And 100 vacuum bags from Weston is $18. So with these 2 items, you can preserve almost everything. Yes, even meat. Jerky is a dehydrated food. And they are easy to use. And now, for a free home demonstration, I wouldn't tell you to get these things if I hadn't been able to use them a lot myself. But I'm going to pick this up and hold it up so you can see it. This is an American Harvest dehydrator, and it's got a lot of trays on it. The base is electric. It forces air up through the dehydrator. It has a lid that goes on it, and then it has these trays. Sorry. And the trays look like this. And this screen comes off so that you can easily get dehydrated food off it. Each one of these is approximately 1 square foot. And the base of this American Harvester will dehydrate 30 of these trays at a time. It is the most cost-effective, most marvelous device ever. The other thing is a vacuum packer, and this is a vacuum packer. And it opens up like this, and you stick the bag in here, and you press it down like this, and you lock it, turn it on, and it will dehydrate. It'll dehydrate just about anything. The thing is about dehydrated foods is that once they are dehydrated, once they are vacuum packed, you can have these dehydrated foods absolutely forever in your basement, on a shelf in the closet. It doesn't matter where you put them. They are going to last really, really well. And I'm now going to try to dehydrate my telephone. I mean, to vacuum pack my phone. I don't know if you can see this. It makes a little noise, but now there's no air left in this bag, and the vacuum sealer is now using a heat strip and sealing this bag. You can see that little line right there. And now my phone is vacuum packed. What else? All right. Here are some peppers. Can you hear these peppers rattling? I vacuum packed these in 2016. I vacuum packed these just a week ago. I also have some vacuum packed raspberries, dehydrated vacuum packed raspberries. All this stuff is dehydrated. Here are some plums, still dry, from 2015, and some banana chips from 2015. And the thing about these banana chips is, if I want to make banana bread or banana pudding or whatever, here they are, they're in my basement, and they're just fine. But there is one thing I'd like to show you, because seeing is believing. This is a pint jar of dehydrated zucchini chunks. And this is a quart, and this is a half cup. And this was packed with chunks, and this is what it amounts to. So 1 quart of zucchini wet makes 1/2 cup of zucchini dried. Or is it a 1/4 cup? I can't remember. But in any case, this is a lot of zucchini. People are always saying, what the heck am I going to do with all this zucchini that I'm growing in my garden? Well, the answer is you just dehydrate it and stick it on the shelf. Now, what you cannot see is that there's a little foggy thing in there. That's actually a package of desiccant, you know, like you get in your vitamin jar or something, a little package of silica gel that will take the water out of something. The other thing that is in this jar is a little oxygen absorber packet. And together, those two things will make this jar, I mean, it's shelf stable for years. And when I put the oxygen packet in here and put that lid on, after a while, this seal popped down just as if I had put it through a canner, but I didn't have to. What's happened is that 20% of that volume of gas in here has been absorbed into that oxygen packet. So I guess that is really all I have to say about food and preserving it. So after you've increased your stores of food and you're rotating your stock, you're eating well in bad weather, even in hard times, you feel more secure than you would otherwise. Is there any other reason you should increase your food reserves? Is there any good reason you should spend some extra time and money and effort to line your shelves with good, nutritious food? And yes, there is one more very good reason, and it is this: so that you can gather up a selection of those good foods, put on your winter coat, and trudge through the snow to deliver some of your bounty to your neighbor. The end.